All right, so again, you're going to turn these in with this assignment from 1.3 practice, okay? So add these to this assignment. All right, so number 11, first thing we want to talk about is the domain. And if you recall, your domain is the same as your x values. Another word for it is your inputs. Another word for domain is your independent variable. Okay? Your range, on the other hand, is your y values, or your outputs, or your dependent variable. So again, these are all the same idea, just different names to them, okay? This was explained in the video for Monday, so hopefully you watched that already. If not, this will help you out. So simply in number 11, part A, we are going to identify the domain and range from this table. So put it simply, my domain is just all the x values. And we write our domain using these squiggly brackets here. So our domain is going to be 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then our range is going to be our y values, which is 5, 10, 15, and 20. Okay? And we know these are functions already because functions have a 1-to-1 relationship. So every x input only has one partner. All right? So this is our function. Part A, pretty simple. Okay? So part B takes a little bit of mathematical thinking. All right? So we have to make a rule that represents this function. And what a rule is just a different way of saying something you've been dealing with ever since you had algebra, okay? So a rule, I want you to understand, is we want to write an equation. All right? So that's just a different way of saying, hey homie, look at this input-output table and write an equation for it. Okay? And I'm going to show you how to do that now. All right. So anytime you're asked to write a rule, I'm going to give you a template on how to start the rule. Okay? So you want to start with your independent variable. In this case, my independent variable, sorry, I lied, your dependent variable. So your output variable. You want to start with your dependent variable. In this case, it's y. So we're going to write down y. Okay? Then we're going to write down equals y. Your dependent variable is going to be by itself. Now, the next thing you want to write down is your independent variable, which in this case is x. But what you're going to notice is I'm going to write it and I'm going to leave some room in front and in the back because we have to do some math to it. Okay? So this is what we're going to try to figure out. Let's look at the table. In order to figure out our equation or our rule, we're going to use the table. And our weapons to use our rule are simple. We can use addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division. So to write our rule, we can use any four of those operations. Later on, we could also use exponents, parentheses, all that good stuff. But for now, we're going to keep these rules very, very simple. So what we're going to ask ourselves is this. How do I use one of these operations to turn the input into the output? Okay? So what I'm asking is this. What do I have to add, subtract, multiply, or divide by in order to turn 1 into the number 5. Okay, the first thing that comes to my head, I like to keep it simple, is what if I just add 4? Okay, so my rule right now is I think I can turn all these inputs, all these x values, into their y values, their output, by adding 4. So let's try this rule. So I'm going to write the rule down into my equation down here. So I think my rule is adding 4. So we'll do plus 4. Okay? So let's test it out. So what I'm going to do is, taking my rule or my equation, I'm going to plug in an x value. In this case, I'm plugging in the first one. I'm going to plug in 1 in for x to test this out. So I'm kind of just going to write it over. So if I plug in the x into x here, what is 1 plus 4? And your answer is 5. Did it give me the correct output? And we're like, yes, this guy works, okay? But here's the issue. It has to work for every single output. Every single set we have, it has to work. So let's try this again. What if I do plus 4 to 2? We can't change the rule. My rule is plus 4. So what is 2 plus 4? Does it give me the correct output? And the answer is no. This rule does not work for that output. So that tells me the rule I created is a bad rule. It's not going to work. So I have to think of another rule. All right? So let's erase this because the rule I thought of did not work. So we tried addition. Addition didn't work. I'm not going to try subtraction. The next thing I want to try is multiplication, because I can multiply 1 times 5 and it could give me 5. So the rule I'm going to try here is I want to multiply this guy by 5. So let's write that rule into my equation down here. So I'm multiplying by 5. Okay? So let's see if that works. So when I plug in 1 into my rule, so 5 times 1, does it give me 5? And the answer is yes, it works. Okay? So I'm going to put a little check mark here. That one works. Now let's check the second input. When I plug in 2 for x, 5 times 2, does it give me the correct output? And the answer is yes, it gives me 10. So it also works. We got to check this rule for all of them. It has to work for every single one. Now when I plug in 3 in for x, what's 5 times 3? It gives me the correct output of 15. It works for that set. And last, I'm going to check when I plug in 4 for x, what's 5 times 4? It gives me the correct output of 20. Okay? So that means the rule that I have for this function is this equation here. Okay? We have now created the rule. It works for the entire table. So in essence, we have created an equation for this table. Okay? You guys are going to do the same thing for 12, 13, and 14. Remember, the template for rules is always your dependent variable equal to, and we're going to do something to the independent variable. In this case, it's using y and x. It's your job to figure out the rule. All right? So go ahead, and I want you to do the 12, 13, and 14. I'll give you about, we'll shoot for what, 20 minutes? Okay? And we'll go from there. All right? If you need an extra explanation, let me know. I'll be here on Zoom. Okay, hopefully this is pretty simple. It just takes some math. What rule do I need for the x in order to get the y? X minus 7. For number 14 is, again, dependent variable equals independent variable. And now we want to create that rule. So if you look here, the first thing I would try would add 8. Okay, it worked for the first one, but you'll notice if I add 8 to 11, it does not work for the second one. So adding 8 doesn't work. The next thing would be multiplying by 2. And you'll notice this works. 8 times 2 is 16. 11 times 2 is 22. 14 times 2 is 28. 17 times 2 is 34. So my rule is multiplying by 2. Okay, and that would be your final rule. Negative x plus 2. So using this function and these domains, I want to make an input-output table. So let's go with the input-output table. Okay, remember, as I mentioned before, your domain are just your x's or your input or your independent variable. So in other words, this is where our domain goes, in the x column. Okay, and now we want to find our range, our output. So we're simply going to take one x value and plug it into our equation, do the math, it gives me my output. So let's do that here at the bottom. So our equation is y equals negative x plus 2. And all we're going to do is take our first x and plug it in for our equation for x. So it's going to be y equals negative parentheses. My first x is negative 5 plus 2. Okay, and now we just have to do this math. Negative times a negative 5, or in other words, negative 1 times negative 5 is positive 5. Bring down the 2, and we get 7. So that number goes here. And then we just repeat this process again. So instead of plugging in negative 5, I'm going to plug in negative 3, my next x value. And we do the math. Negative 1 times negative 3 is positive 3 plus 2, and that gives me 5. So there's my 5. And then we repeat the process for the next x value. So I'm going to plug in 0, negative 0 plus 2. That gives me 2. And then we have one more. I need to plug in positive 2. So positive 2, negative 1 times positive 2, that's negative 2 plus 2, and that equals 0. Okay, and we completed the input-output table. Go ahead and do number 8. All right, guys, number 8, just remember, you're going to submit all these problems to that, I'll go back to it, but this assignment that's due Wednesday, just put these with it, okay? Including number 8. And I'll give you the access code now. Please check in before you get out of the Zoom. This is how I'm taking attendance. So it's DESK, D-E-S-K. Write that down. And once you're done with number 8, you are free to go unless you have any questions, okay? And I'm going to go back to the problem number 8. So DESK.